Good day. My name is Lara van Niekerk, and I'm from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. And I'd like to share with you today some of our key issues for South Africa's estuaries that emerged from the National Biodiversity Assessment 2018. I'm going to first take you through this NBA assessment steps and then finish and conclude with some of our management recommendations. So our general steps in the assessment is to delineate the estuary space, classify our estuaries, determine the pressures on them, evaluate their condition, apply the IUCN Red listing approach, setting conservation targets, and then determining our protection levels. In terms of delineating our space, in South Africa, we use the estuary functional zone, which encapsulates all physical and biological processes, including key habitats like reed, mangrove, seagrass, and salt marsh. It extends as far inland as tidal limit or backflooding. It is also encapsulates the 1 in 100-year floodline. And this time round, we brought in the concept of estuarine shores, which is from the berm to the back of the surf zone, because we find estuarine invertebrates and fish congregating in this area and that the health of this section matters. We've also done water-wall mapping and embedded ourselves in the coastal map. Also linking up with river-dependent ecosystem types in the offshore. The next step was to classify our estuaries. We've expanded the South African old classification system from 5 to 9 estuarine types across 4 biogeographical regions and also 3 microsystem types. These are estuaries smaller than 2 hectares or 200 meters in length. So you all know the estuarine lakes, predominantly open in estuarine bays, but we've added estuarine lagoons, that's Longabon. We've also added arid predominantly closed systems, about 6 systems around the west coast. We've split river mouths into 2 large fluvially dominated and small fluvially dominated, and also the very large temporary open and closed type was split into large and small temporary open and closed. Altogether, we've got 290 estuaries that groups into 22 ecosystem types. We also have 442 microestuaries. Next, we look at the pressures. There's going to be a few slides on pressures. Flow pressure has increased. A third of South Africa's freshwater flow no longer reaches the coast. And about 20% of estuaries are severely impacted by freshwater flow. In each case, you'll see a map like this with bubbles showing you where the major pressures are, and a graph like this highlighting the extent of pressure, and the red colors means high to very high. And as you can see here, about 20% of estuaries are under severe flow pressure. In terms of pollution, a third of estuaries are under severe pollution pressure. We've got about 840 million litres of wastewater flowing daily into estuaries, and we find that water quality is deteriorating at regional scales. Our biggest changes are occurring around the urban areas in the Cape area and also here around KZN coastline. Fishing pressure is significantly up, gone from roughly about 3,000 tonnes per annum to 3,700 tonnes in 2018. 21% of estuaries are under severe fishing pressure, especially illegal gill netting taking off in the KZN areas and also the opening up of marine protected areas. Land use and development pressures are also up. 29% of estuaries are subjected to severe habitat modification. Less than 10% have no development in them, and most of these are confined to national provincial protected areas. Emerging issue is small-scale mining, sand, diamonds, and heavy minerals, causing permanent habitat destruction in about 12% of estuaries. Artificial breaching. Only 15% of South Africa's estuaries are artificially manipulated, but it basically involves about 16% of the total estuarine habitat in South Africa. An even bigger concern is that artificial breaching level seems to be becoming lower, leading to more premature openings. Whitefly is a good example here, and this is causing siltation and increasing flood risk in the long run. Finally, we've added a category called biological invasion pressures. with 2 elements being quantified at the national scale, alien or extra-limited translocated fish occurring in about 25% of estuaries. There's 22 species involved and having 1 to 9 per system. Also, a third of estuaries have invasive terrestrial plants in them, and aquatic invasive species heavily infest about 80% of estuaries. So all of that brings us to the next step, which is evaluating our estuarine condition. You have to look at this map, and what you see is the blue colors means estuaries are in good condition, and the brown colors means the estuary is severely or critically degraded. The size of the bubble indicates the size of the estuary. So we've evaluated the Water Affairs classification rating system. More than 60% of South Africa's estuaries are relatively healthy, but it only translates to about 24% of our estuarine area, with more than 60% of habitat significantly modified, with important ecological processes under severe pressure. This is not surprising at all. Thus, then we applied the IUCN Red listing of ecosystem types approach to South Africa's estuaries. Across all the realms, land and sea, estuaries are the most threatened ecosystem type in South Africa. An ecosystem type, is an ecoregional type, is a group of similar type of estuaries in a biogeographical region supporting characteristic suite of estuarine processes and biodiversity. They use the IUCN grading from least concern to endangered and critically endangered, the red colors on the map. We found that 86% of estuary types were threatened, with 9% critically endangered and 45% endangered. But if we calculated this by area, 99% of total estuarine area is threatened, 3% critically endangered and 74% endangered. Then that is matched against our conservation targets. In 2011, we developed a National Biodiversity Plan for South Africa, and since then, only 2 MPAs or PAs have been added to our estuarine protected estate, the Sundays and the Tugela, but that only added about 13 square kilometers, and there was no no-take zones in those 2 systems. In fact, we've had an erosion of protection with the lifting of no-take restrictions and the development of commercial fisheries and marine protected areas. Finally, we determine the protection levels. There's a rating here from well protected to not protected at all, with green colors meaning protected to well protected. And we found that estuaries are underprotected in South Africa, with only 18% of ecosystem types and 1% of estuarine area well protected. But we can have immediate gains to 22% of total area if fishing effort in 3 systems are managed better: Longabay, Knysna and Kosi. In terms of habitat and species, salt marshes, seagrasses and mangrove habitats are under severe pressure, with mangroves no longer occurring in 10% of estuaries and 30% of salt marsh habitat loss. All exploited estuarine fish are overfished, with stocks of the 5 most important species collapse, ranging between 2 to 6% of historical biomass. Historically, the latter contributed more than 80% of landed catches. 35 bird species are estuarine dependent. 14% of these are threatened, and we have lost nearly 260,000 water birds since 1918, with only about 31% remaining. So, to address the above issues, we came up with a 9-point strategic estuarine management framework. The first and foremost is to increase our protection levels, but we need to look at our basket of protection tools: marine protected areas, roaming protected areas, stewardship programs, Ramsar sites, special management. Estuarine lakes are in crisis. We therefore need an estuarine lakes program to ensure that the future climate change resilience, restore these habitats, improve water quality and quantity to these systems, and reduce the all overpressure on the resources to increase their protection levels. This is a critical call to arms, as we are deeply concerned about the condition of the lakes deteriorating overall in relatively short times. We also need to strengthen the estuary management protocol. In addition to having the bottom-up approach at the moment. The protocol focus is very much on the municipal level. We need to also look at proactive strategic resource use and management at the national and provincial departments, a more top-down approach to meet the municipalities halfway. We need to look at regional water allocations and fisheries resource management, and we also need to look at the legal definition of the estuary functional zone, which do not include all biophysical processes at the moment. And finally, we need to look at a mining type ECA for South Africa's estuaries. Extractive activities need to be carefully examined to ensure that ecological, social and economic and access issues are addressed in a sustainable manner. For example, access around the West Coast is a real problem since half those estuaries can't be accessed as they're situated in mining areas. We also need to look at long-term monitoring. Our field survey data in many cases are nearly 30 years old. We need to look at innovative monitoring techniques like eDNA. DEF needs to expand its fish and fisheries monitoring program to the KZN area. We need funds to implement the Water Affairs National Estuary Management Program. And we also need to look at the NBA Estuaries Monitoring Register and natural capital accounting methods for extent and condition accounting, something we're working on at the moment. Then we also need to look at an estuaries restoration program. We need to invest in solutions to restore estuary ecology and infrastructure and to strengthen climate change resilience and sustain ecosystem services. The UN Decade of Ecosystems Restoration 2021 to 2030 makes restoration and protection of critical ecosystems an imperative at a global scale, and this presents a huge opportunity for us. We need to look at funding mechanisms and international funding instruments like blue carbon trading, ecosystem-based adaptation, global funds, and national debt restructuring mechanisms, which will be highly supportive of South Africa's strategic estuary management framework. As part of this, we developed a national restoration overview of key actions required to improve conditions, and these can be prioritized on biodiversity importance, conservation requirements, or ecosystem services to the community, how far off we are of the desired condition, and the reversibility of impacts. If you look at this, roughly 40% of systems need some sort of an intervention around the restoration or protection of base flows, improving water quality, rehabbing riparian areas, and removing alien vegetation from the systems. Another third of systems ask for some sort of a reduction of fishing effort and bait collection and looking at stormwater and floodplain drainage. This list of activities goes all the way through down to detail like restoring floods or controlling mangrove harvesting and implementing cattle exclusion zones. So we have a framework and we have some recommendations that could be prioritized in any which way you want to. Finally, in terms of our conclusions, we have a strong policy framework in South Africa, and that has made significant progress in estuary management. Water Affairs has determined the flow requirements of nearly 40% of estuaries, with about 37% of them already having classification of water resources. More than 20% of estuaries also have estuary management plans in various stages of completion. But where we are lacking is in our formal protected areas, no-take zonations, and using some of this basket of tools as said before. And then we also need to look at, you can see fisheries management and climate change is two activities which actually need some sort of a more formal engagement with the estuary management planning process. In conclusion, I'd like to recommend that you go and look at some of the National Biodiversity Assessment reports. The first important one for us is the Estuary Realm report. The details, all the things I've just barely touched on in this slideshow. And the last one is the synthesis report, which pulls all of South Africa's status of the ecosystem types, and has got incredibly interesting information there on all the biodiversity of South Africa. I hope you found this insightful, and I'm hoping that some of this might inspire you in some ways to tackle some of the small problems that relates to estuaries. Thank you.